at the site. And I'm very excited because it's going to take us to some areas that I've never been at Point Molate. So that'll be fun. And to those of you who have already gotten an email confirming that you're coming, stay tuned for a final reminder and a reminder to sign and print out and bring those liability waivers. And if you don't have a printer or have other difficulty getting that, just go ahead and email me and I can work with you to sort that out. But I will hand it over to our great speakers. Jim Hansen is a landscape architect and the Conservation Committee chairperson for California Native Plant Society East Bay. And Andres Soto is the Richmond organizer at Communities for a Better Environment, as well as many other accolades, host of El Show de Andres Soto on KPFA, for those of you who listen to that station. He's a musician and so much more. And Jim and Andres are both co-chairs of the Point Molate Alliance. So thank you so much for being here, and we can't wait to hear your presentation.
Great. Andres, I'll go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint.
Okay. Yeah, so Jim and I are going to tag team on this, and we have not rehearsed it, so you will be seeing this live. All right, so this is an image of Point Molate looking from the south to the northwest. That is the point in the distance, and on the far right near the text, that's over by the Point Molate Beach Park, which is really the only ongoing active access we have right now, other than, you know, if you walk along the shoreline from the park. And so this has been a point of contention in Richmond for nearly 20 years now. Some of us have been involved the whole time, and we feel very positive about the potential outcome of reaching the community vision of a regional park for access to all. So go ahead, Jim.
Okay. So we'll kind of talk around four main topics. A little bit about the place, its evolution over time. It has a very rich history, and it's very visible whether you're coming out Saturday or you happen to be going by the Richmond San Rafael Bridge at some point and you just steer off to Point Molate for a little side trip. There's a lot of history that's still very much visible there. And then we'll talk in detail about, you know, what's been involved with the campaign to keep it as a public place, including some development in the areas that have already been developed in the past, but is largely a public resource for a lot of different reasons. And then we'll touch briefly on some advocacy opportunities. Okay. Andres, I'll just say a few things. The green oval is basically the north top of the San Pablo Peninsula there, and you'll see just the little marker balloon, the red balloon, which shows the Point Molate Beach Park, and that was essentially what Andres was describing. We were looking at from a hillside into the bay that's right in here. Now, just to kind of put things a little bit in context, not only geographically, but socially, culturally, industrially, on the other side of the hill from Point Molate is the Chevron oil refinery, which if you've driven by 580, yeah. You've driven by 580 going over to Richmond San Rafael Bridge to San Rafael, or coming back the other way, you'll have seen the tanks on the right and some of the refinery. If you're coming from San Rafael, it just looks like an amazing big open space. But just just to say a word, this is also to the right where you see the word Richmond, is also one of the highest asthma rates in the state. It's also an area, the kind of the center of Richmond, that is many families who rent. I think 60% of the families in Richmond households rent. At least that was the case during the last census. And then it's also an area where there's a lot of families, working class families with always not a lot of income. So this is in terms of serving people, this is an underparked, underserved area, and this is a area that we'll describe a little further. Andres, do you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, I'm glad you have this photograph up because you pointed out, Point San Pablo to the north and then Point Richmond to the south. And what a lot of people don't know is that used to be an island. And what they did was they quarried out, especially on the south side and the west side, a lot of the rock. And what is now Miller Knox Park, a very heavily used park on the shoreline there, they took that rock they took that rock and they filled it in. And if you see that channel just to the southeast of there, that's the part of the Port of Richmond. That's where the Levin Coal Terminal is. That's where the auto imports, and just north of that, to the northwest of that, you'll see the Bnsf rail yard. So the Bnsf rail yard arrived in 1901, and a year later, Pacific Oil arrived, which later became Standard Oil of California, which is now known as Chevron. So both significant portions of the refinery and the railroad are actually built on landfill. And what do we know about landfill development during an earthquake? Liquefaction. So that presents a clear and present danger. And then Jim pointed out the map. You can sort of see a triangle formation. That is what they call the Iron Triangle or Central Richmond. It's bordered on the east by the BART tracks and the Amtrak railway. And to the north of that is North Richmond, of which the southeast corner is incorporated in Richmond, but 3/4 of it to the west and the north are county unincorporated. And then San Pablo is literally an island completely surrounded by the city of Richmond. So this only gives us a portion of Richmond. It goes all the way up to Hilltop and all the way out to deep El Sobrante Valley. And then, of course, down along the shoreline, what they call the annex into close to El Cerrito. El Cerrito has no coastline. So I just wanted to point that out and for y'all, in case you really didn't know the geology of the area as well. And that comes into play with some of the risk.
And just for reference, down here is Berkeley. Across here is Tiburon, San Rafael. And Andres was talking about the geology, and this whole kind of peninsula floated up over millions of years from Southern California. And it has the same geology as across the bay here in San Rafael and China Camp. So just a lot of geological history too. Speaking of which, we touched upon I think Point Molate probably mirrors in some ways a lot of the history of the Bay Area with the early Ohlone, the Spanish Rancheria, a Chinese shrimp camp that was established in the late 1800s, very similar to the shrimp camp the state park across the bay in San Rafael. And then interesting piece was the Winehaven building, which is an old castle brick structure that you'll see if you go out there in the kind of we call the South Watershed. And that was the result of the San Francisco earthquake when the California Wine Association was based in San Francisco. And during the earthquake, they lost millions of gallons of wine in the quake and moved over to Point Molate. And so there's still, the buildings are still there, the worker housing is still there. That takes us to World War II, when this became a naval fuel depot that serviced the Pacific Fleet. And we can tell you some historical places to visit in Richmond, like the Rosie River exhibit, that really capture that whole period. I'll just say a little bit here, and I'll kind of turn it over to Andres. Long about 2009, 2010, a Berkeley developer upstream came up with a proposal to put in basically a Las Vegas-sized casino development at Point Molate. And this was a long fight. A lot of us became very involved, and we'll talk a little bit about how people became involved over time. But this was a tough fight. An advisory measure was put on the Richmond ballot, and actually 60% of the voters voted against putting a casino at Point Molate. It also brought in a new crop of city council people who I think a lot of Richmond's political history has been kind of shaped from that. And so basically that was defeated at the time, but there were results from that, including the developer was not happy and sued the city. So Andres, can I just kind of turn it over to you to carry a little bit more of the story?
Sure, and I saw the chat where people are having some problems hearing me. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We can hear you fine, but there's some static sometimes coming in.
You might be a little close to the mic.
Well, we'll see. Okay.
That's better. That's better.
Okay. Yeah, so one thing I want to mention about the Huchun Ohlone, they're a band of people who lived in this area for at least 5,000 years. And when you see the name Cocheño, that is a Spanish corruption of the name Huchun. And they are one of several bands of the Ohlone people that stretch all the way from the Carmel region, all the way up to the San Francisco Peninsula, and all the way up to what we would now call Crockett. But the proposal around the casino was introduced in 2003, and a number of people who got together to oppose it fought it, and especially when Gail McLaughlin was our mayor, that's what really helped push it to becoming a city referendum. And as Jim said, not only was it defeated at the poll 60-40, but it was also a major victory for the Richmond Progressive Alliance to begin to shape policy in Richmond. Of course, then the developer Jim Levine out of Berkeley, he's the guy. Hold on a second. I'm seeing the chat, so I'm going to see if I can adjust my mic a little bit. And well, that's my speaker. Oh, okay, it's good now. All right, so I'll proceed. Yeah, technology. I'm sorry about that. So ultimately, the developer and the tribe sued the city for trying to renege on an agreement for the casino. Then there was a community plan that was created by a vision of community people way back, as far back as 2005, 2007. That plan has been updated with more input for more people. And ultimately, the mayor, Tom Butt, and some of his cronies in the development community, like Eddie Orton, got involved in a secret deal, and they cut a deal with the developer to do a backup plan of a housing plan. Yeah, that I hear that background sound. That's not my mic. That must be somebody else. But anyway, so there's competing plans, competing lawsuits. You know, and I don't know if you really want to get into all the technical details of it, but what's important is that the developers come in with a plan. It's not favored by the park district. Certainly, the people who now represent the Ohlone community, the Confederated Villages of Least John Ohlone, headed up by a woman named Corina Gould. They are opposed to this because they have identified 4 sites that they consider sacred within the development area. And one of the things about the a community plan is that it does enable commercial development. Everybody wants to see commercial development at the former Wine Haven building, which, as Jim said, was the California Wine Association's facility. And prior to Prohibition, it was the largest winery in the world. And they built it there because of access to the deep water port. And so we believe that ultimately, you know, the people want to see a park. The people want to see some limited development that involves history, that involves entertainment, that involves access to physical activity. We have soccer leagues. Richmond is now mostly Latino community. Sao Paulo is about 60% Latino. And so soccer is now the new popular sport, and there's a shortage of soccer fields around Richmond. And so soccer leagues are supportive of preserving this so that there can be access and development of soccer fields in some of the flatland areas. So, you know, we think that the plan has something for everybody except for the fat cats who want to rip us off and build a very ill-conceived housing development. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay.
Hey, Bam, how you doing?
Good. So I think maybe part of the story here is that organizing around this was stimulated many years ago when, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it was stimulated many years ago when the city was looking at this site being turned over during the Clinton years, as Hunters Point and Alameda and other places were. I don't know, I don't recall if Moffett was on that or not, but and in came a casino development, and so that's what really got people organized initially. And so we'll be kind of going, we won't try to explain all this right here, but we'll be going through a number of kind of some of the central elements that have made up the work of a lot of community members, environmental organizations, including the Sierra Club Bay chapter, since 2003. So, you know, we've kind of been at it for a while. And so we'll kind of go through those kind of one at a time, but this is kind of the, I guess, the package, if we were to say that. So let me just go on here and just say a little bit. After the property was turned over to the city as part of the Base Closure Act, as other places were around the bay, a base reuse committee was set up of a lot of Richmond residents. And you know, there are a lot of nice things that were said in the plan. It was a conceptual plan. But towards the end of the planning, as I'm told, one of the members pushed for some housing development in the watershed, 670 units. And the reason I mention that, because I know you've talked about planning as part of some of the earlier presentations. And this was one of the early, and you never know when a plan is going to make a difference or not. So that particular plan or idea or concept to put housing in the South Watershed carried through all the way to the current day. It affected a settlement agreement the council made and other things. There was never really a full specific plan that was ever done on the site, even to this day. So plans can have importance, some of the early ones. So as we talked about, I think some of the activity really started to happen around 2010 as it came back to the city council, and Citizens for a Sustainable Point Molate started. And these were just residents that just said, this is just not the right thing for our area. This is public land, it's beautiful public land. It ought to be available to families and to, it's public land, it ought to be able to be used as a recreational area. And then, kind of coming up to a settlement of the casino developers lawsuit against the city, where we can talk a little bit more about that, but because it did lead to a lawsuit the way it was done. The Point Molate Alliance was started because this settlement agreement basically said, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and do this without doing any real planning for the site. So you'll see some of the folks on the bottom was showing up at City Hall for a demonstration, and one of many organized efforts at the city council level. So, basically people carried through and were added and continued all the way through that. Andres, do you want to say anything in particular about any of these particular elements? Because both of them were ways to, well, particularly the last two, engage people in the planning of Point Molate.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Is that any better?
That is better.
Okay, good. Only to say that when the Navy turned it back over to the city for $1, they created a committee that came up with a reuse plan. This was before there was a progressive political movement in Richmond. So a lot of the vested interests, like the building trades unions, the developers, and others, were looking at as an opportunity to further exploit the housing situation in Richmond, which means building high-end housing on the fringes of the city and neglecting the city core. And this is a strategy that has disabled Richmond since the uprisings, African-American uprisings in 1966 and 68. So it's really a legacy of the sort of Jim Crow politics that have been practiced in Richmond for most of the history of Richmond. And so that's why the community plan, which was looking at how can we create more opportunity for recreation, more opportunity for open space for families, because one of the things that we know is that Richmond was developed extremely densely. There was a lot of lot subdevelopment during the war years because Richmond went from 26,000 people to 110,000 people in 18 months in 1941. And so there's a lot of families that don't have yards, and the parks like George Miller Park, Point Pinole, and others are heavily used for socializing by many of the Richmond families. The community plan really takes into account that, as well as understanding that there should be opportunities for economic development that includes Richmond people first, not some kind of outside mega corporation developer or vendor for that matter. So
Yeah, and kind of to put things in context, it's hard to kind of cover 20 years. But after that settlement agreement was made by the city council, which was done in a closed session and was sued about because a city cannot basically determine zoning in closed session. So that was a result, a lawsuit came from that. But several of us organized to try to get a specific plan done by the city. What we got was what they called a vision plan, which doesn't have the same legal authority, but it's as good as we could get with that council. But what we did was we used that as an opportunity for the city to spend some money on a planner, but also to hire buses to bring Richmond residents out to Point Molate. One of the things that's used to really kind of disenfranchise the public from their public land is to put up fences and to not let them on there. And so you never develop a relationship with the place. But what we did was we were able to get buses hired. We advertised, we got the city to advertise to a degree, the planning department, the people who were doing this. And we went out on Saturdays and brought people up into the hills. And it was the first time they could see what their land looked like. And it's stunning. So this was kind of a victory in itself. And what the Point Molate Alliance did, the community plan, and this is where organizing uses kind of images to make our own vision, because the consultants kind of had their own idea of what they wanted out there, and we wanted to present an alternative vision. And so this is what we call the community plan, and this is the bay that you were looking at in the very first picture. And we hired a architectural renderer to show the south watershed here and the north watershed here where the Winehaven building is. And this is actually Point Molate itself, which was cut down to partially to put in a pier for the naval use and so forth. But you'll see that what we realized is we wanted to provide sports fields. There are a lot of kids in Richmond who love and play soccer. There's a limited fields. This is an absolutely beautiful place to come out and exercise. You'll see these roads going through the hills up in the hills behind it. They have wonderful views of the bay. These are short, not that long walks, but wonderful way to get out and have exercise. And these are close to the communities of Richmond that are underserved in park. And this is a first-class resource for people. So we wanted to provide a vision, and part of that was actually drawing it up.
Yeah, and one of the things we've learned since the developer came up with the housing plan was, of course, that this area is considered a high fire danger in and of itself, not to mention any risks that it could occur from one of the periodic explosions or ongoing flaring that is happening at the Chevron Richmond refinery. And there is only a 2-lane road in and out. They bought off the police department and the fire department by offering to build a substation out there. And so they're supporting the developer's plans. But we think it unnecessarily puts people at risk. It takes away public lands and puts it in private hands. The East Bay Regional Park has examined the developer's plans and have publicly gone on record as saying that the design plan would disrupt the ecology up there sufficiently that some of the endangered species that are there, plus there's deer, there's flocks of deer and wild turkey and other wildlife there, raccoons and possums that all live there. that would no longer be able to effectively survive there if they put up, all these housing units that that the mayor and his cronies want.
Yeah, and it's really hard to kind of, obviously see this, but this is some of the original coastal prairie of the Bay Area up in the hills here. There's actually, if you've ever heard Molate fescue, it's a red fescue that is kind of a indigenous to this site. There's an intact, even though you can see pipes from and so forth that were left over from World War II, there's a lot of just basically intact coastal prairie, coastal scrub, a beach strand along the down here along the bay, a shallows here which holds eelgrass beds that are so rich and important both here and around the corner from this peninsula that they're used by San Francisco State University, the Romberg Center, as a nursery stock to replant eelgrass throughout the bay, an important plant species and a nursery for our shrimp, small fry fish, sardines, and other basically the fish, for lack of a better term, diversity of the bay. So there's a lot of kind of the original story, natural history of the bay shore edges that's still here at Point Molate, which is very rare. So that's one of the things, and not only that, we fall in love with the place and the specialness of it. But a big part of our organizing is getting people out there. There's a lot of examples. The lower left, there are volunteers who do stewardship work. Some people come out to paint. Here's a class from, I think it was Kennedy High or Richmond High, I don't remember which.
Richmond.
Okay, where we brought science classes out and invited some of our, like the Watershed Project and others who have people who work on these topics to show, here's a scope. We're probably looking at an osprey nest up here on the right. The osprey have returned to this site over the last decade, and one of the members of Audubon regularly goes out and basically counts the number of birds that are being raised there each year. The nests are amazing. Sometimes they're just right on top of a phone pole. He actually, when they had to do some remediation work in front of the wine haven, he thought of the idea of getting a plastic swimming pool and mounting it to the top of a phone pole. And the birds, the osprey came in with the sticks and all. These are very big nests. They look almost like a bald eagle nest. And they used that as a nesting site. They've got, let's see, we've got some example, people picnic out here. Here's actually Andres. We had a bio blitz and music. So I think just one of the ways of when a place is not well known is finding ways for people to make a connection with it. Andres, did you want to add anything to that?
No, only to say that as you can see, even with the limited structures that are out there and the limited access, this is a tremendous community resource that if this were, put in the management of the East Bay Regional Parks and, the community vision was implemented, this could become a significant shoreline park for the entire region, not just for the people of Richmond. Although we would suspect that if there was even greater picnicking area development, that the people of Richmond would, you know, use it much like Miller Knox. Miller Knox Park is so used that if you have to, if you want to have a picnic out there or a family party, you have to get out there really early in the morning and reserve your area, because otherwise it'll get snatched up. So we need more recreational area. Plus, with sea level rise, we're going to need that eelgrass to help protect the shoreline there. So, you know, there's multiple risk factors going on.
So, you know, another obviously a big factor in any campaign is just the whole communications and messaging. We put on 3 community forums, and actually this was a scientist from San Francisco State talking to a group on a Saturday morning about the eelgrass beds at Point Molate. We talked about some of the economics. We talked about cultural history, how this was an important place for people during World War II working in the shipyards to come out just as a place of respite. And this is a place that was important to Richmond kids growing up. This was a place where if you're in high school, you come out here. So it has a lot of history and connection to the people of Richmond that we wanted to kind of bring out for newer residents. We put together a website to, you know, with photographs telling some of the story, in having alerts, some background on any current issues, things before the city council or BCDC. One of our folks who just liked it put together a yard sign, and we started distributing those. It was just a really lovely, simple design. And then as the Sequa in the plan made it through the Richmond City Council in 2020, we put out 2 issues of the Richmond Community News, where we went into a lot of detail. The central article is racial and climate justice for Point Molate. Another one was Richmond Mayor pushes high-priced housing enclave for Point Molate. Major fire danger haunts housing plan. City hires worst developer for Point Molate, which was really true. And distributed that. And this was one of our partners who was very generous. And a lot of us contributed articles, and it went out to Richmond, basically to Richmond residents, two particular issues that were well timed. We also tried to do an initiative after the council voted to go ahead, and that was the start of COVID. We actually were ready to send out petitioners, put an initiative to basically reverse that decision. But, you know, world events kind of changed that. Andres, anything more on kind of just the communications end of the campaign?
I just wanted, you brought up a couple of points, and I just wanted to touch on that. You know, is that, you know, as a person, a kid growing up in Richmond, one of the things that was attractive about going to Point Molate was that was one place where the cops would not go. And so it was a place of safety, because growing up in Richmond during the 1970s and 1980s, fear of the Richmond cops was real and palpable. Things have improved a lot, but back in those days, Richmond police and the cowboys were notorious. The other thing is that when we defeated the proposal in the ballot advisory measure in 2010, then Mayor Gail McLaughlin set up a Point Molate advisory committee with some city staff assigned to it. But when Tom Butt became the mayor, he unilaterally just dismantled that. He didn't want any public input. He didn't want a public plan. And so that's part of our communication, is that this is trying to stop a very Trumpian type of mayor from bullying his proposal through and thinking that he can get away with it because the community isn't paying enough attention.
Okay, so, and you'll recognize, every campaign has, talking points, messages, so forth. The upstream development, when they lost their casino contract for what I understand was lack of performance, did sue, and they sued, as I understand it, for the city for 750 million. And even though the Bureau of Indian Affairs basically said they would not improve casino there. So how you would make money without a casino there and lose $750 million, everybody was kind of scratching their head. But one of the city council member was for this, would kind of use that message and put it out to the public. And if you're not part of the, you don't know the details, that can scare you as a Richmond resident. So that was one of the things. You'll hear we need housing, but then when you look at it, do we need shoreline housing for people with maybe an average income of $250,000 a year? Well, in Richmond, no. We need housing for a lot of working people, teachers, nurses, crafts, tradespeople, people that basically keep the Bay Area running. And then the one that brings in a whole new kind of side to campaigns. We need city income from the property taxes. Well, one of our allies, we talked about this and said, I don't know, let's look at this. There's no infrastructure, which will cost in the tens of millions of dollars. So, and there's all these financing mechanisms being thrown around. So we hired a land economics professional who basically said this would sink the city because you have to provide expensive police services, a police substation, fire department, 24-hour fire personnel, a whole new total infrastructure from wastewater lines, electricity, water, the whole thing. And when you add all that up, it's a heck of a lot of money that will have an ongoing cost to the city. And basically the land economics professional we hired said it just doesn't pencil out. So you'll hear some of those kind of tropes thrown out. We focused on things like save our public land, develop housing downtown, and develop more affordable housing downtown. That this was, as Andres was talking about, this is a high fire risk zone. On the other side of a hill from a refinery, and there's only one road in and out, at least to Highway 580, right at the Richmond Centerfield Bridge toll plaza, which many times during the day, if you've been there, will back up even on the weekends. And then we're talking about some of the wonderful biological resources that we want to keep into the future. And eelgrass has also been recognized as a carbon sequester. So at any rate, messages are always a big part of every campaign, and selecting those is just very important, as you all know. We'll just say a few words, I think, about the legal action. I mentioned briefly the council approved a settlement agreement for a mega housing development in closed session, which we basically sued on as illegal under the Brown Act, the Ralph Brown Act. And then the EIR under the California Environmental Quality Act inadequately analyzed a lot of those issues around, say, transportation is one of the things Sequa has to analyze, the vulnerability of the site, the violation, the general plan does not call for housing out there. It calls for a tourist destination, a water-based destination. And we looked at the mitigations they're proposing for their many impacts, and it just, they just were totally inadequate. So the Sierra Club, California Plant Society, I believe Citizens for East Shore State Parks, the Fishermen's Association, several people, and I'm sorry I don't have all the names right in front of me. I think I do, but sued under Sequa, and that will be going to Superior Court.
Yeah, Jim, do you recall the name of the folks who did the economic analysis that we hired?
I don't right offhand.
Okay, Geeta was asking about that.
Yeah, we can get that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
yeah, so let me just say that, elections have consequences. And it was actually a couple of rogue RPA people who joined with Tom Butt, who supported the settlement that now got us into all trouble. They were both rookies, didn't know what they were doing, and we're suffering the consequences. Subsequently, they were defeated, as were other pro development candidates. And during the 2020 city council election, 4 of the candidates running in 3 districts supported the community plan. And recently, the BCDC, the Bay Conservation and Development Commission, their Bay Plan designation for Point Molate was not to go forward with the housing development. And then, of course, the East Bay Regional Parks Master Plan has the Richmond Hills Regional Park. And, we have met with the board members and with the executive staff. They have some of the WW bond funding that we can use for the purchase. We are trying to, settle this thing. It's always the easier thing to do. But of course, the developer is greedy and his pawns in the tribe are greedy. And so, we're trying to reach a number that we can all agree upon.
Yeah, and so the honestly, one of the reasons a lot of us who do precinct, who do go out and walk, who kind of are known to be active, talk to candidates about supporting a better plan for Point Molate than, and I don't think we've mentioned this yet, up to 1,200 or more condominium units in that, off that one road on the other side of the refinery, and supporting more of a public use there. And 4 candidates did support that. And basically
three of the 4 won.
3 of the 4 won, yes. The BCDC, one of our county supervisors who we've talked to regularly, took up the charge on BCDC and made the case that they should not be changing, that they should not look at it, at least not look at it at this point, any change to the Bay Plan for Point Molate, which calls for a waterfront park beach priority area and not intensive shoreline housing. And that will be coming back in the spring. We'll just say a word about that. And then we're, talk to members of the East Bay Regional Parks Board who have a capital improvement project about this whole thing, this whole need to start to serve underserved urban core communities and provide healthy open spaces. And so when there was a hearing on that, 100 members of the community wrote in individual emails or spoke at the meeting. We just didn't, I think they even commented that these were all sincere letters. It wasn't a form letter. I mean, the form letters definitely have their place, but they were impressed by the turnout from the Richmond public. Okay, I think just a last word, and we mentioned this briefly. We look at this biologically. We look at this from public values, but other things come in, like looking at a enhanced infrastructure development district, and which was one of the proposals. And what does that mean and what does that do? And so this was where, just doing some deep dive into finances, some of things that I have not looked at and others have not looked at in depth before, some of our members have, opened up a whole new avenue of how this is not just a loss of a valuable public space, but also has financial implications for the city long term. Looking at the EIR put together by the consultant and the attorneys that the SunCal basically paid the city to hire to do this work. And there was a promise of 70% open space. You remember that base reuse plan? Well, the promise was 70% open space. And if you look at the photo or this kind of drawing here, you'll see the outline of the property. This is a road that kind of surrounds the property. And you'll see these dark lines and the red ones. The dark lines is how far the hill would be cut into to put all these condominium units and everything else. And even just looking at that, you look at the green area behind it, see if I can get that back there. Does that look like you're getting 70% open space left? Well, thank goodness for Google Earth, because one could do an overlay and do an area analysis and find out that in no way were they meeting that at all. So just calling some of this, these false promises has been very important, doing some analysis. And we heard earlier mentioning about having an architectural rendering. And then another thing is just following what's on the council agenda. Things pop up as a result, follow-ups. And we just won't go into details, but we saw something Tuesday night that we called, kind of raised and got the council to make some changes to. I'll just kind of say that, this is kind of a whirlwind, but our campaigns involve legal strategy, working on the planning and regulatory side, who gets elected, action research, communications and messages, and a big one is alliances, because no one of our volunteer organizations can do it alone, and that's been a big part of it. And I think what drives a lot of us is keeping these beautiful places, these places that really refresh and inspire us, places to bring family out, places for kids, places for wildlife to continue to exist along the bay. And that's kind of just what keeps us coming back. Andres, any other?
Well, yeah, just to say that, this area, while parts of it have been left somewhat untampered, there has been a lot of human activity on this place, and it would be an amazing example for future generations to preserve and restore this area. It's in public hands. Getting public shoreline property is virtually impossible anymore. And so, despite the legacy of Richmond being a community exploited by external interests, this is one where the people are standing up to those interests. And, we need your help. We need the Sierra Club. So we need everybody's help, because it's only when the community piles on that we will be able to be victorious. And so looking at this slide upcoming, there will be Brown Act and Sequa lawsuit hearings, and those are open court hearings. And the BCDC will have a hearing in the spring. We hope that we can count on the Sierra Club to join us in flooding that hearing with the voices of those who want to save and preserve this for public usage, and that ultimately this is a San Francisco Bay Shore land use issue. And so some of that land use authority is within the city of Richmond, but it's also a regional issue. And that's why, you know, we're pleased to be able to be here with the Sierra Club tonight, because you have the San Francisco chapter, you got the Redwood chapter, you got Loma Prieta chapter, and we're going to need all of those voices singing together as a chorus to have a victory here. And I think it's something that, you know, we can point to down the line to future generations and say, you know, here the community fought a 25-year battle, but the community persevered and the community won, and this beautiful space is now saved for this. I see the question, does Chevron have a position on development? They have been eerily silent, but it has been expressed by some of the Chevron people that they are not really interested in having a bunch of high-income, educated white folks living on the other side of the ridge from their dangerous refinery. But they have not publicly taken a position on this. At one point, they did offer to buy the land from the city for $85 million back in 2003. But the pro-development city council at that time turned it down. They were going to buy it and then turn it over to the city for management, but they would hold the title. Some people didn't trust Chevron, and other people just wanted to get the development. So aside from that, they have not really spoken. I think that's it. And I can probably stick around for another 5 minutes. I have to go meet someone else now at 8 o'clock. But I know Jim is here and Pam is here and can probably answer most of the questions, but I can stick around a couple more minutes.
Well, thank you very much. I was curious. One thing I wanted to ask was, when do you expect the Brown Act and the Sequa hearings to occur?
I think one's later this fall. I think one's more towards the beginning of early 2022. Okay. One's federal court, one's Superior Court.
Yeah, and the Superior Courts are just like really hung up because California has underfunded its courts for about the last 20, 25 years. So the courts are really backlogged.
Yeah, anybody else? I know there's a lot of questions coming through chat. Does anybody want to, I didn't capture them all. If you want to just ask a question, that would be great.
Well, I said, you know, I saw the question about Chevron, but there's also a second question, which is the proximity of the refinery concern for the community plan, and is there any mitigation suggested? It is always a concern for the broader Richmond, San Pablo community and the Bay Area community at large. Anytime the refinery is, you know, having its problems, which seems to be more frequent these days. And the only mitigation I would suggest is decommissioning the refinery and shutting it down.
Chip, do you want to chime in?
Sure, I have a question. Thank you for your presentation. So you mentioned federal court also. Does that say that the lawsuit is a Sequa/NEPA lawsuit?
Yeah, good question. The Sequa would be in the Superior Court. The Brown Act suit is in federal court because it involves gets complicated, but it ties in with the original suit by the upstream when they weren't able to continue with the casino, which also involved a Native American tribe from Ukiah. So that's the one that's in federal court because it links into some of those earlier lawsuits. It's a little hard for me to describe, even if I were an attorney, I think.
And then that part two for the another question, was there ever a community advisory board, or RAB as they might have probably have called it, for this, sponsored by the Navy?
Yeah, that would have been the base, yes, that was the one that put together the base reuse plan early on back in around 1990.
Yeah, the Reuse Authority Board or Advisory Board. And, they're the ones who agreed that there should be economic development out there. But, there was, the usual special interests, like, the developers, like the building trades unions and others who were part of that. Nobody suspected they would come out with a plan for a mega casino there. And so, but many of the people who were engaged in that process did support the casino, and ultimately that got defeated.
Any other questions? We have maybe time for one or two more before we do our breakout.
He said three of the three new council members were elected who support the community plan. How does that lay out across the whole council? Does the council majority still support this project?
Yeah, the current council majority, because it's a mixture. Richmond just started district elections in 2020, so that's why there were 3 seats that were up. That were selected by district, and all 3 of the people were RPA candidates, and all 3 of them won. So that also then Eduardo Martinez is a remnant of the at-large elections. He's still on the council, and he's the 4th RPA person who supports the community plan. There was a candidate who was also running in one of the districts who supported the community plan, but lost to another candidate who supported the community plan.
And how many people are on council?
7. So we have 4 out of the 7. And there will be a redistricting process that could have some impact. And then, of course, the new council and the mayor, current mayor Tom Budd is turned out in 2022, good riddance, and he will, his seat will be open. And we suspect that, we know Eduardo Martinez will be running for mayor, and we suspect there will be a couple other folks who will be running for mayor as well. But we hope we can all unite behind a mayor who supports a community plan and actually listens to the community.
Right. Thank you so much. It's very interesting to hear.
I have one last question, which is when you have a campaign that goes on for so many years, how do you keep the advocacy group together, or engage new advocates along the way, or do others drop off?
All the above. I mean, I got involved with this in 2003. So that's like 18 years ago now. It's hard to believe.
Mm-hmm.
My hair used to be dark. But, along the way, a lot of good people have joined us. Some people have moved on. Some people have died, but we're constantly reaching out. Educating the young people is critical. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add to that some volunteer group to go out and do some invasive weed pulling, started up to kind of conserve the grasslands and other things. And so that brought new people out. Pam Stella, who's on the call, contacted some local teachers, and we started to do, the photos of, we had high school kids coming out as part of their science day. So they take a full day to look at the bay and talk about climate change and taking walks up into the hills. And the, I think what happens is, you'll see things start to come back, and it may be you go on to another campaign and you go, this is starting to start up again. So sometimes there's a lull, but people who have history go, it's time to come back and get re-engaged. And so I think it is going out and keeping a relationship with the place that I think is important.
I really appreciate Pam and Jim and Andre talking about this, because of the campaigns, like in East Palo Alto is a fairly young campaign, but it could go on for a long time. And Mare Island, of course, yet to hear about that. But yes, this is amazing. And I hope that we can help in keeping it alive, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Gita. So one thing we'd like to do today is break out into groups, probably of about 5 or so. And our next advocacy action for next week is to write a 50 to 100 word statement, as if you're writing to the Richmond City Council about what you think about this development, or what you think should happen to this, what was it, 100 and I don't know how many acres it was, 415 acres or something in Point Molate. So we've got about 10 minutes, and Jim, if you could stick around, that would be great. You put you into a breakout room. Just really what resonated with you, and if if you had questions and you want to clarify anything, let your group know and or your group leader know. So I'm gonna put people into breakout rooms now, and again, it'll be about 10 minutes.
And I think if you put Pam in one of the breakout rooms, she could answer a lot of questions. So make sure you keep her and Jim apart.
I'll try, but you know what? We've tried that, and it's there's no way to do it.
If you both end up in the same room, one of you can leave and come back, and Susan will reassign
Yeah,
you.
and I can try to put you in a different room.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Look forward to
Andre.
Thank you
working
so
with
much.
See
Thank
ya.
you. Maybe I wasn't supposed to leave right then and there. All right.
Susan, do we have time for any follow-up questions for Pam and Jim, or are we behind?
We're a little bit behind. We were going to try to do, unless we want to just, have people do this on their own. There was that one video on the Richmond shoreline by Josh Brandt that was in the webinar.
Why don't we take questions if we have them, just since we have the experts here at our disposal. I'd hate to miss the chance
Okay.
if there are questions.
Well, I have a question about the contamination at Point Molate,
Mhm.
and if there's known contamination left over from the Navy,
Sure.
and how that would play into opposing any kind of housing.
No, good question. Fortunately, this was, these were oils. Some of these were heavy oils, greases, things like that for the big World War II ships, and bunker fuels, things like that. So there was some contamination in front of the wine haven, and there was a lot of debate about that. But eventually, I think there were like 300 dump trucks that pulled dirt from front of the wine haven and took that.
300 dump trucks, Steve.
Huh?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, and so that was an area that was cleaned up. There is a water permit. They're monitoring wells. There's still tanks in the hills. If you go out there,
Yeah.
they're sunk into the ground. They're real interesting. I think you can even see them on Google Earth, and we might be able to see a few on Saturday. If you go out there, you can kind of pick them out, but they're kind of sunk into the ground. I don't know who they were hiding them from, but it was kind of visible in a way. And there is I think it's TCE, and I always forget the full name, but there was a small plume in that south watershed, which seems to be stable, which makes it fine to do a park. But if you put housing there, you've got to build on put people on the second floor. That's what I recall from that time. But overall, it's not bad. I mean, I think that's the thing. It's pretty manageable.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question about the BCDC decision. So if BCDC were to vote your way and say no, do they have any authority to stop the project, or is that just an advisory recommendation?
That's a very good question. And this was really my first introduction to the Bay Plan, because as you know, they have authority on the first 100 feet. And that's pretty clear by statute. And I think some follow-up, even litigation around that. I think it just I don't know the exact answer, but it gums up the works.
Help with that a bit.
Huh?
I think I can help with that a bit, but
Yeah, it's not as strong as some things, but it makes it a lot more complicated. It may affect some of the investor interest in this. It's a little bit of a gray area, but we consider it. Let's just say there were a lot of phone calls that happened after that, a lot of worried phone calls. So it's not nothing.
if I can add to that, if not approved, SunCal would have to change their plan slightly. They would then have to go back to the city council, and the current city council would not approve changes in the plan. So it would make it very difficult for them.
Are you talking about the BCDC Bay Plan?
Correct.
Which
If the
year was
BC,
that?
if BC, say again?
Which year was that done in? Approximately.
So SunCal applied to BCDC recently for approvals within that 100-foot band on the shoreline and advisory for the hillsides. But BCDC took a 4-month postponement on that vote, whether to proceed with, to consider their proposal or their application. And so that has not been heard by BCDC yet. So they have not voted on this yet.
Are they encroaching into the 100-foot band?
Yes, and they encroach slightly into the 100-foot band. So if they do not gain this, if they are not approved by BCDC, they do have to make a change to their plan that the council would have to then approve.
And I think, Pam, that's a great response to what Willie wrote in the chat. What could a new favorable city council and mayor do if elected? They could then refuse to support that.
Yes.
And there were also, I think, some really, these development agreements that come with this are worth really looking at too. And sometimes they're a little hard to read, but you go, well, wait a minute. SunCal has the right to determine what consultants the city can hire. SunCal has the right to put through a Mello-Roos on this, which are all public, actually public decisions. There was some really stuff that was just amazing to us. And so we're really following having the city get involved with financing this project. And this is tens of millions of dollars with a big Southern California Irvine developer who's had some financial difficulties in the past. And so a mayor and a city council can say, wait a minute, what are the risks here? We're not going to go there. I don't know, there are some opportunities that come up along the way as a result of this.
Is SunCal the developer?
Yeah.
Okay.
So at this point, where is the focus of your advocacy? We're waiting on the lawsuits. There's nothing we can do at the city until there's a change in the plan. Is that right? And so is BCDC the focus?
BCDC was the most recent focus. But we had what I described came up Tuesday night at council, where there was a proposal to have consultants paid by the city to start looking into what they call land secured financing arrangements. And we knew what that meant. That meant for Point Molate and meant for this big Seneca project we haven't even talked about. And we said, no, wait a minute. And that the city council would not have an opportunity to kind of look at these work plans. They would just kind of go ahead through the staff level with the developer and the staff. I said, no. And so the council are for, actually a 6-to-1 vote. The mayor voted no. On a 6-to-1 vote, the council said, we want to see that work plan. We want to be advised of the risks of getting involved with any kind of land secured financing agreement right from the start. Don't kind of do all this work and put it in a package and put it in front of us. We want to know from the very beginning what's going on.
What? Okay, honey.
So things
So
come up sometimes on a weekly basis. I don't know if I took that off, but we follow the council meetings weekly for anything related to this. Oh, and there's another proposal to put a sewer line, dig up the streets of Point Richmond. People are not going to like that. So, there's another thing. We want to look at the West Contra Costa County transportation planning, because the entrance and the exit on back onto the freeway there is onto the fast lane. It's not the best. And we're really wondering if, because the mayor is on that committee, if they're pushing for public money to put in a big, multi-million-dollar overpass there. I don't think that's a good use of public money. So there really are, elements to that plan that are problematic, I think, from a public interest point of view that we want to keep following.
And as far as this group is concerned, and whether there's anything at this point which would be timely or in the next several weeks, do you have any particular ideas or suggestions?
You know, honestly, I think the Richmond City Council in total, hearing from members of the public that this is a bigger Bay issue, that this is a values issue for the Bay Area and how we see us as a Bay Area going into the future. If we're really talking about providing parks for people close by, if we're really talking about really looking at developing our downtowns, repurposing our downtowns rather than filling up our shorelines. I mean, I think they need to hear that, because I don't know what, sometimes things get kind of parochial within a city and they don't make it out to the bigger Bay Area. And I think hearing from people here makes a difference, because it says we're watching. You know, this is what we want to be as a Bay Area in the future. So there's nothing specific. There's no specific action item that it could pop up Thursday Thursday night when the agenda comes out. You never know. But I think the fact that the people who are doing the fight on the council for the right thing, they need support, because this is a tough battle. And the ones that are going along with this, you know, I think they need to be reminded that there's issues involved here.
That's great. So Susan, is everyone supposed to write a letter to the council? And
Yeah, so the activity for next week is to write, similar to what we did last time, was a 50 to 100 word statement to city council members and the mayor of Richmond about what you think should happen with the land at Point Molate. And be prepared to read your statement, and then I'll get the email addresses of city council members out to everybody, and we'd encourage you to submit them. But let's just target getting ready for class next week with the 50 to 100 word statement. And you'll learn more also. I'll try to get you. So Jim, one thing we do is we provide the presentation to people just so they have it for their background. So if you can email me that, then I can send it out to everybody. And also, hopefully you can follow the outing on Saturday and learn more.
And there is the Point Molate Alliance website mentioned, and Pam just posted it in the chat too.
Okay, and I'll make sure I put that link in my email as well.
And they also have a very good Facebook page too. So for those on Facebook.
Yeah, please follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and because there are times that we need the public to weigh in, and we would very much appreciate your support.
I think that's great. And Pam, I love the painting behind you.
That's Point Molate Beach Park.
Yes, I was wondering.
We've had many artists come forward and photographers that have brought Point Molate to the public in so many beautiful ways. You'll see some of that on the Facebook page. And there's also Point Molate for All with the number 4 on Facebook. And that's a photographer who just fell in love with Point Molate and has taken gorgeous photos.
One thing our group had a question about, and that is, I think it was, well, anyway, you mentioned some high fire danger or risk, and also human activity. So what did you mean?
Okay, so on the north watershed, the south watershed is coastal scrub, grassland. There's some broom that came into, and then right at the crest of the hill, and just on the other side of the start of a tank farm and the refinery on this other side. On the north watershed, where the wine haven is, if you go out there and you're, like I say, and you go drop off you'll come over into a valley, which is the first watershed, and the second one where the wine haven is. In that north watershed, if you go back in the Google Earth history pictures, they planted a hedgerow of blue gum eucalyptus. And over time, those trees have spread, I don't know, 200 feet, going all the way up to the hill to the top. And so there's a lot of litter. I think there is a lot of fuel buildup there, and that whole peninsula is the state of California rates areas as under fire severity zones. And that area is a high fire severity zone, and it's categorized that way.
I didn't know if there was, fireworks that go on there, illegal activities.
That would be scary.
The eucalyptus are enough. Okay, thank you.
There's a lot of litter buildup there. That
Yeah,
would not be a good combination.
Well, thank you very much, Jim and Pam and Andres, who is already off. We really appreciated you coming and spending your evening with us. And just one other thing I wanted to throw out there. I sent most of you I should have sent all of you an invitation to our fundraiser next Friday, not this weekend, but this week, but next week, to a Guardians of Nature fundraiser, free ticket. And we are honoring Catherine Phillips, who was she was basically the director of Sierra Club California for many years. So we're honoring her. There's always good, fun auction going on too. So I hope you can join us.
The tickets are free.
Yeah.
And so
the right price.
They're the right price. The program is short and it's usually interesting.
Yes, it should be short. 1 hour program.
Always interesting, Geeta. Always interesting. Inspiring.
Inspiring.
Enthralling.
It moves along really well. I was really.
Is it a virtual meeting? Okay, well, he's not. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it's all virtual.
It's all virtual, yes, right.
But there's a lot of nice little, different video clips on different topics that should be entertaining.
And in the meantime, the silent auction goes on, which is also virtual. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
I couldn't physically get there, so that makes it easy for me.
All right.
Yes, and if you are interested, please let Susan know, because you need to get a unique link.
Yeah, and actually the email I sent out had Justina Gutterman's email address. So
okay, so
she'll send
Justina
that.
know.
Yeah,
that would be even.
So respond to Justina and she'll set you up.
Okay, I'll read your email more carefully. I did see it.
Please read it carefully. Yes, we really look forward to having you all, because this is an amazing class, and we thought this would be great.
All right. Well, thank you all, and I'll see you guys on Saturday morning. All right. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, Jim and Pam.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye.
Yeah.